Disclaimer: the following story compilation contains terrifying real-life accounts of sleep paralysis, an experience where individuals find themselves awake but completely unable to move, speak, or react to the horrors around them. These stories are based on actual reports and witness testimonies, though some names and locations have been changed for privacy. Sleep. It's supposed to be the one place where we're safe, where the body rests and the mind drifts into dreams. But for some, sleep becomes a battlefield. A terrifying limbo between being awake and asleep. A place where the rules of reality bend and the unimaginable becomes possible. This phenomenon is known as sleep paralysis, and it's far more terrifying than most people realize. At its core, sleep paralysis is a condition where the mind wakes up, but the body does not. The person becomes trapped fully conscious, but unable to move a muscle or even scream. For some, it's just a frustrating or confusing few moments. But for others, it's something much, much worse. Because in that paralyzed state, many people begin to see things, dark things. Shadowy figures. Demons. Dead relatives. Whispering voices. Suffocating pressure on the chest. Cold breath at the back of the neck. And perhaps most terrifying of all, these hallucinations often feel real. Too real. According to medical science, sleep paralysis occurs during REM, rapid eye movement, sleep, when the brain disconnects from the body to prevent us from acting out our dreams. Sometimes, we wake up mentally before the paralysis ends, leading to this terrifying sensation of being trapped inside our own body. Doctors explain the visions as mere dream fragments or hallucinations, our frightened minds trying to make sense of sensory confusion. But if it's all just in the brain, why do so many people around the world report seeing the same exact entities? Across cultures, languages, and belief systems, people have described eerily similar figures: a shadow person lurking in the corner, a demonic woman sitting on the chest, crushing the air out of their lungs, a creature with long arms and glowing eyes, whispering threats. These aren't isolated incidents, they're part of a global phenomenon. In Japan, they call it shivers. In Newfoundland, Canada, it's the old hag syndrome. In Pakistan and India, it's sometimes blamed on jinns or churels. In African cultures, it may be viewed as a spiritual attack or even witchcraft. In many Native American traditions, sleep paralysis is considered a spiritual visitation, often from ancestors or malevolent spirits. How can something so universal, across places and time, just be a coincidence? This compilation isn't just about the condition of sleep paralysis. It's about the people who have lived through it and barely escaped with their sanity intact. These stories are not fictional. They are testimonies from ordinary people, students, parents, travelers, night shift workers, who experienced things in the dark that no one could explain. Things that stayed with them long after the paralysis ended. Some of these people only had the experience once. For others, it became a recurring nightmare that haunted them for years. A few of them still sleep with the lights on. Some avoid sleep entirely for days, just to delay that terrifying moment when the paralysis returns. Because for them, sleep doesn't bring peace, it brings terror. As you listen to the stories that follow, ask yourself, what would you do if you woke up and couldn't move? If something was watching you from the corner? If the darkness suddenly felt alive? Could you keep your sanity? Or would you do what most people do, convince yourself it was all just a dream? But remember this, sleep paralysis often strikes when you least expect it, when you're stressed, tired, or sleeping on your back. It could happen tonight. It could happen to you. Now that you understand what sleep paralysis is, let's dive into the first terrifying true story. A story of a man with no eyes. It was a cold autumn night when Michael, a 22-year-old college student, first experienced sleep paralysis. He had heard about it before, how sometimes the mind wakes up before the body, leaving you trapped in your own skin. But he never imagined it would happen to him, nor that it would be so terrifying. Michael had just finished a long day of classes and studying. Exhausted, he fell asleep on his dorm room bed, his laptop still open beside him. Around 3 a.m., he suddenly jolted awake, or at least, his mind did. His eyes opened, but his body refused to respond. He tried to scream, to move his arms, but it was as if invisible chains held him down. Panic surged through him, his heart pounding louder than ever. Then, through the dim moonlight seeping from the window, he saw it. A figure standing silently at the edge of his bed. Michael's eyes strained to focus. It was a man, dressed in a dark suit, standing perfectly still. But something was wrong. The figure's face was a blank void, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a smooth, featureless mask where a face should be. Michael tried to look away, but his head wouldn't budge. The room felt colder, the air thick with a suffocating dread. The figure didn't move or speak, just stood there watching him. Michael felt an overwhelming sense of being observed, not by a living person, but by something else. Something not of this world. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Then, as suddenly as it began, the paralysis lifted. Michael gasped, clawing at the sheets as he bolted upright. His room was empty. No one was there. For days afterward, Michael avoided sleeping. When he finally dared, the terrifying figure returned, always the same no-eyed man in the dark suit. Sometimes standing closer, sometimes watching silently from the corner. Always emotionless, always watching. Seeking answers, Michael began researching sleep paralysis forums online. To his shock, he found dozens of reports describing the exact same entity, a tall man, dressed sharply, but with no eyes. Some called him the Faceless Watcher, others called him the No-Eyed Man. The figure seemed to be a common nightmare shared by many experiencing sleep paralysis around the world. Michael also learned that this figure appeared in folklore, sometimes seen as a harbinger of doom or death. In some cultures, it's considered a demon or a lost soul trapped between worlds. As weeks passed, the episodes became more frequent. Michael started noticing strange things outside of sleep paralysis, shadows flickering in mirrors, cold spots in his room, and fleeting glimpses of the no-eyed figure when he was fully awake. Was it just his mind playing tricks, or was something following him beyond the paralysis? One night, desperate and terrified, Michael decided to confront the figure. As the paralysis gripped him, the no-eyed man appeared at his bedside, closer than ever. Michael mustered all his courage and whispered, "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't respond, but the room grew colder and a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, Michael felt a crushing pressure on his chest, as if the no-eyed man was sitting on him. He struggled to breathe, but forced himself to stay calm. Then, just as quickly as it came, the sensation faded. Michael awoke with a start, drenched in sweat. After that night, the episodes stopped as mysteriously as they had begun. Though relieved, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the no-eyed man was still watching, waiting in the shadows. His story serves as a chilling reminder. Sleep paralysis isn't always just a trick of the mind. Sometimes, it feels like something else, something watching, waiting, and maybe even reaching out. Linda was a middle-aged woman living alone in a quiet suburban house. She had always been a light sleeper, but lately, her nights had turned into a waking nightmare. It started slowly, a fleeting sensation of heaviness on her chest when she woke up at odd hours. She chalked it up to stress from work. But soon, the episodes escalated into something much more terrifying. One night, Linda woke up feeling completely paralyzed. She tried to move her arms, her legs, her head, nothing responded. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. Then, out of the darkness near the foot of her bed, she saw it, an old woman, hunched and with tangled white hair, crawling slowly up the wall toward the ceiling. The figure's eyes were sunken and black, and her mouth moved as if whispering a strange, guttural chant in a language Linda didn't understand. The old woman's bony fingers clawed at the ceiling as she moved with a slow, eerie grace. Linda's heart pounded furiously, but she was trapped inside her own body, unable to scream or even cry out. Then, the old woman slowly began to descend from the ceiling, moving toward Linda's bed. She climbed up the side, her bony hands grabbing the edges of the mattress, until she finally sat on Linda's chest. The weight was crushing, like an enormous stone pressing down on her ribcage. Linda struggled to breathe. Every inhale felt like shards of glass scraping her lungs. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The old woman whispered louder, her breath icy cold on Linda's face. Her eyes never left Linda's, but they were empty, void of any human emotion. Linda wanted to cry, to beg, but no sound escaped her lips. Then, as suddenly as she had appeared, the old woman faded away. Linda gasped for air, tears streaming down her face. The room was silent again, except for Linda's ragged breathing. The next morning, Linda told her sister about the terrifying visit. Her sister, who was well-versed in folklore, told her it sounded like the old hag, a creature known in many cultures as a spirit or witch that sits on a person's chest during sleep paralysis, crushing their breath and feeding off their fear. Over the following weeks, Linda's episodes became more frequent. Each night, the old woman would return, crawling on the walls, whispering her strange chants, sitting heavier and heavier on Linda's chest. Linda tried sleeping with the lights on, leaving the TV on, even taking sleeping pills, but nothing stopped the horrifying visits. In desperation, Linda began researching her house's history. She found an old diary tucked away in the attic, belonging to a woman who had lived there over a century ago. The diary spoke of a hag that haunted the home, a twisted old woman who comes to feast on the frightened. The more Linda learned, the more she feared she wasn't just dealing with a sleep disorder. Her house, it seemed, had a dark past, one that reached out to her through the paralysis episodes. Linda's story is a chilling example of how sleep paralysis can blur the lines between the natural and the supernatural. For her, the old woman on her chest was no mere hallucination. It was a visit from a dark presence that preyed on her deepest fears. Jason was a single father who had recently moved into a small apartment with his young daughter after a difficult divorce. Tired from working 2 jobs and juggling parenting, his nights were restless but necessary for recovery. However, soon after moving, he began experiencing something he could never have imagined: sleep paralysis, and it came with a terrifying visitor. One night, Jason woke up in the middle of the night, fully aware but unable to move a muscle. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he noticed something unsettling: a small figure crouched in the corner of his bedroom. It was a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, sitting silently and rocking back and forth. But then the child started crying. Not the soft, comforting cry of a real child, but a high-pitched, piercing scream that sent chills down Jason's spine. The child's mouth opened impossibly wide, wider than any human mouth could, and the screams grew louder and louder, echoing in the small room. No matter how Jason tried, he couldn't move or call out to his daughter or anyone else. Terrified, he closed his eyes, hoping to wake up from the nightmare. But when he opened them again, the child was still there, staring directly at him with hollow, black eyes. The next morning, Jason told his sister about the experience. She looked concerned and told him about a tragic event connected to the building. Years ago, a child had died in that very apartment under mysterious circumstances, an accident that had never been fully explained. Some neighbors whispered about hearing a child screaming late at night, but no one could find the source. Jason's sleep paralysis episodes continued night after night, with the child screaming growing louder and more frantic. One night, exhausted and desperate, he set up a video camera to capture what happened while he slept. When he reviewed the footage, the room was empty, no child in sight. But his terrified face, frozen in paralysis, told a different story. He later shared the video with a paranormal investigator who said Jason might be dealing with a restless spirit tied to the tragic past of his home. Jason tried everything: moving rooms, changing sleep schedules, sleeping with the lights on, but nothing stopped the screaming child from appearing in his dreams and paralysis episodes. The haunting seemed to follow him, as if the spirit was trying to communicate or maybe warn him. His story is a painful reminder that sometimes sleep paralysis can feel less like a medical condition and more like a ghostly visitation, one that leaves lasting scars not just on the body, but on the soul. Emily was a typical teenager, juggling school, friends, and a growing fascination with the supernatural. She never imagined that she would become part of a horror story herself, one that would leave her questioning reality every time she closed her eyes. It started with sleep paralysis episodes that began after a stressful exam week. The first time it happened, Emily woke up unable to move, her body frozen but her mind alert. At the edge of her room, illuminated faintly by the streetlight outside, stood a figure unlike anything she'd ever seen. The creature was humanoid but twisted. Its limbs bent at unnatural angles, as if broken and reassembled incorrectly. But what was most chilling was its smile, a grotesque, crooked grin that stretched from ear to ear, revealing rows of jagged, yellow teeth. Its eyes glowed faintly, watching Emily intently. Emily's heart hammered in her chest, but she was paralyzed, unable to scream, move, or close her eyes. The creature crawled slowly toward her, making no sound except a low, guttural whisper of her name. Nights passed, and the figure returned every time Emily fell asleep. Each night, it came closer, crawling on the floor or walls, whispering secrets she couldn't understand, but that filled her with dread. She tried to ignore it, but fear soon overtook her. One night, the creature was right at her bedside, its crooked smile inches from her face. Suddenly, Emily managed to let out a muffled scream. The paralysis broke, and she sat upright, heart racing. But that night, something was different. The next morning, Emily found long scratches on her arms and neck. They were fresh, deep, painful marks she had no memory of getting. When she showed them to her friends, they gasped in shock. Then rumors started spreading. Some classmates said they had seen the same crooked smiling figure lurking near Emily's house late at night. Others reported hearing her name whispered in the dark. Terrified, Emily turned to research and found that the crooked smile was a common figure in sleep paralysis folklore, sometimes called the twisted grin or the smiling demon. It was said to feed on fear, leaving physical marks on those it haunted. Determined to rid herself of the entity, Emily sought help from both medical professionals and spiritual advisors. She learned coping techniques to manage sleep paralysis, but knew the demon's presence went beyond science. Sometimes, the scariest things are not just in our minds, they follow us, lurking in the shadows between sleep and wakefulness. Emily's story is a frightening glimpse into the dark side of sleep paralysis, where the mind's horrors become flesh and escaping them feels impossible. Sarah was a seasoned traveler, always chasing new adventures across the world. On a trip to a historic city, she checked into a quaint, old hotel known for its charm and vintage decor. The first night, exhausted from her journey, she fell into a deep sleep, only to find herself trapped in a nightmare unlike any other. She woke, or thought she woke, only to realize something was wrong. The room around her wasn't the one she had gone to sleep in. The furniture looked older, dustier, with peeling wallpaper and faded curtains. The air was heavy and cold, filled with the scent of aged wood and something metallic. Sarah tried to move, but her body was frozen. Panic set in as she realized she was experiencing sleep paralysis. Then, from the corner of the room, she saw a woman dressed in clothing from the 1800s, long, flowing skirts, a bonnet, and pale skin. The woman moved slowly, gliding across the floor without a sound. When she got close, she bent down and whispered in Sarah's ear, "You don't belong here." Sarah's heart pounded. The coldness seemed to seep into her bones. She wanted to scream but couldn't. The woman's eyes held a mixture of sorrow and warning. Suddenly, Sarah was jolted awake, back in her real hotel room. But something was off. Her suitcase, which she was sure she had left near the door, was now at the foot of the bed. The air felt icy, and the faint scent of old wood lingered. Over the next few nights, Sarah experienced similar episodes. Each time, the room shifted into that older, stranger place, and the mysterious woman returned with the same whispered warning. Sarah researched the hotel's history and discovered it had been built on the site of a house from the 19th century. The woman she saw was likely a former resident, whose tragic story had become entwined with the place. Though relieved she wasn't alone in experiencing such haunting episodes, Sarah felt uneasy. She wondered if the sleep paralysis was a bridge between times, a portal where the past reached out to the present. Her story is a haunting reminder that sometimes, What we experience during sleep paralysis might not just be our minds playing tricks. It might be something else, something reaching across the veil of time. After hearing these 5 terrifying true stories of sleep paralysis, it's natural to wonder, are these experiences purely scientific phenomena, or do they hint at something beyond our understanding? From a medical standpoint, sleep paralysis occurs during REM sleep, when the brain temporarily paralyzes the muscles to prevent us from acting out dreams. When we wake before the paralysis ends, we remain conscious, but unable to move, often accompanied by vivid hallucinations. These visions can be frightening as the brain struggles to interpret sensory input during this unusual state. Scientists believe the hallucinations, shadowy figures, pressure on the chest, feelings of dread, are brain-generated, a mix of dream imagery and real sensory information. Stress, sleep deprivation, irregular sleep schedules, and sleeping on your back increase the likelihood of experiencing sleep paralysis. However, what makes sleep paralysis particularly unsettling are the similarities across cultures and stories. The old hag, shadow figures, faceless men, demonic creatures, and even whispering spirits appear in reports worldwide. This raises questions: why do so many people, separated by time and place, see nearly identical entities? Could it be that our brains are wired to produce certain archetypal images in fear-induced states? Or could there be something more, a connection to the supernatural or spiritual realms? Historically, many cultures have interpreted sleep paralysis as a spiritual attack or visitation. For example, in European folklore, the old hag was thought to be a witch sitting on a sleeper's chest, draining their life force. In Japan, shivers was believed to be caused by vengeful spirits. Indigenous peoples around the world sometimes see these experiences as encounters with spirits, ancestors, or malevolent entities. Some paranormal theories suggest sleep paralysis serves as a doorway between dimensions, moments when spirits or entities can cross into our reality. The consistent descriptions of certain figures, such as the faceless watcher or twisted grin, might be evidence of recurring spiritual beings that prey on humans during their most vulnerable state. Skeptics argue that these interpretations stem from cultural storytelling, fear, and imagination. After all, the human brain is a powerful organ, capable of weaving terrifying tales from the smallest stimuli. Whether purely neurological or partially supernatural, sleep paralysis remains one of the most mysterious and disturbing sleep phenomena. It challenges our understanding of consciousness, fear, and reality itself. The people who experience these episodes are not just victims of a quirk in brain chemistry, they are witnesses to the darkest corners of the mind, and possibly glimpses of something beyond. After hearing these 5 terrifying true stories of sleep paralysis, it's clear that this phenomenon is far more than a simple medical condition. Whether you believe in science, the supernatural, or somewhere in between, one thing is certain: sleep paralysis can shake a person's very sense of reality. For many, sleep paralysis is a fleeting, isolated experience. But for others, it becomes a haunting cycle, an endless loop of fear, helplessness, and visions that refuse to fade. The stories of Michael and his no-eyed watcher, Linda and the old woman on her chest, Jason and the screaming child, Emily and the crooked smiling demon, and Sarah's haunted hotel room remind us how vulnerable we are when consciousness and the physical world slip out of sync. If you ever find yourself unable to move upon waking, with a presence in the room or pressure on your chest, remember you are not alone. These experiences, as terrifying as they are, do not mean you are losing your mind. Many people around the world have survived and learned to cope with sleep paralysis. Experts recommend healthy sleep habits, stress reduction, and avoiding sleeping on your back to reduce episodes. But beyond the science, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if a shadow lingers longer than it should, don't ignore it. Some say these encounters are warnings, messages from the other side, reminders that the line between the living and the dead, the waking world and the spirit realm, is thinner than we think. And so, the question remains: when you close your eyes tonight and the paralysis grips you, will you be ready? Will you recognize the signs? Or will you become the next story told in whispered fear? Sleep well. If you can. 97.